Now, exclusive information here. According to Fox News, a series of tests have been conducted in the past few days from Beijing, China. Here's what we understand. On Friday and on Saturday, while the world was watching North Korea, China quietly performed a dramatic series of missile tests on its own to send a message, we believe, to the United States and the world. U.S. spy agencies detected the Chinese military launching a series of 20 missiles at mock-up targets designed to look like the American THAAD missile battery and advanced U.S. Air Force F-22 stealth fighter pilots. China has long opposed the deployment of U.S. THAAD missile system in South Korea, something that seems to be getting extra juice now given the activity in North Korea. Officials also believe the Chinese military tested intermediate, medium, and cruise missiles, also meant to coincide with its Army Day, which celebrations occur on the 1st of August. So breaking news from the Pentagon on that, as we talk about the ICBM test last night in the Pacific on behalf of the U.S. military, and on the heels of North Korea's test last Friday of their own ICBM. Watch all that.
And Xi Jinping delivered a speech at the Great Hall of the People in celebration of the 90th anniversary of the founding of the PLA. The president reviewed the history of the PLA and discussed the historic founding moment known as the Nanchang Uprising against the Kuomintang on August 1st, 1927. He praised the Army's importance in terms of safeguarding the country, coping with different threats, and protecting China's sovereignty and international interests. President Xi also noted that China is a peace-loving country and will help safeguard world peace and regional stability.
China is a peace-loving country, and Chinese people would never allow anyone, any organization, or any political force to separate any part of China's territories from the country. China will not swallow the bitter pill if anyone does anything that jeopardizes the country's territorial sovereignty, safety, and interests.
In the meantime, President Xi Jinping said the PLA is rapidly moving towards a strong information-based armed forces, adding that the PLA must be bold in its reforms and innovation. He noted that China should aim at developing the most cutting-edge military technology in the world and further increase the role technological innovation plays in the building of the Chinese People's Liberation Army and its battle effectiveness.
China will be dedicated to the reformation of its national defense strategies and its army construction. The barriers hindering the reforms should be eradicated, and we shall also deepen the reforms of socialist military system with Chinese characteristics, accelerate the development of information technology and modern military build-up. In the meantime, we should be aware of the important role that science and technology plays in military strategies.
President Xi has been pushing for a military modernization program to make the PLA a more streamlined force that is capable of protecting its people and safeguarding regional peace.
I think great progress has been achieved for the People's Liberation Army, and over the past years, we have more modern fighters, bombers, and we have more frigates and destroyers, and a lot of modern weaponry and equipment have come to the PLA. And also the quality of the officers has been growing up. You know, we have more officers with bachelor degrees, master degrees, and some of them even have the PhD. And also, as you know, the reform and the defense reform and the military reform is going on. The reorganization of the PLA is going on. And until now, I think great achievements have been achieved. And the Central Military Commission and the headquarters of the PLA and universities and the formations of the troops, all of them have been reorganized. As you have witnessed from the military parade in Zhuzihe, Inner Mongolia, I think that is a new face, new look demonstrated by the PLA to the whole world. So in short, a great achievement has been achieved.
That's the view from Beijing. What about here in Washington, D.C.? Brendan Mulvaney, what does the U.S. think of the new look PLA? Because the reforms are being implemented quite quickly, and there's a lot of new hardware out there too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you hit on it. There was a lot of new hardware, some of it making its public debut, some we've been hearing about for a while, so that was nice to see. From the American perspective, so the DF-21, the new aircraft, the new battle tanks and things like that. But I think one thing that he also mentioned is the training aspect, right? This has been a big change for the PLA to become a more professional army. They have an NCO corps, which they didn't have just a few years ago. They're paring down to make it a lighter, fitter, and presumably better military. So I think not only on the hardware side, but also the software side, they've made some big achievements.
So Xindaoshu in Beijing, obviously we're seeing these reforms, but what are these for? What is the PLA actually designed to do now that it wasn't able to do beforehand?
Well, I think the goal of this reform is to make it a modern military army. One of the most powerful military force in the world. As we know, like China is the second largest economy. So, and also you have interests basically around every corner of the world. So you need a powerful force to protect the national interests, national security. We still remember in 2011, before the Libyan war, and yes, there's a withdrawal of the Chinese workers from that country. So that's a vivid case, like how awkward that is at that time. Like China needs to basically speed up its reform and to make it more capable of doing things like that to protect the Chinese nationals and the interests overseas.
That's right, force projection well beyond its natural limitations. Xiao Zhou, let's pick up on those reforms. What are some of the biggest goals and challenges ahead for the People's Liberation Army as it continues to improve its overall capabilities?
Yes, it's a good question. I think the PLA is determined to defend the country, and also it is committed to better maintaining China's national interests. Because, over the past years, the nature of war has changed. And the international situation is changing, and the hardware is changing, and everything is changing. So we have to keep pace with what is happening internationally and what is happening around China. So I think the PLA is trying to keep pace with the times and tries to be more capable to defend the country. And yes, you are right, we have challenges. I think the biggest challenge, as the gentleman in Washington, he mentioned just now, over the past years, over the past 3 decades, we have not fought any war with any country. We don't have, the direct experience from modern wars. And since the world is changing so rapidly, I think we lack the experience. But we have learned a lot from the wars conducted by the United States and the conflicts or the attacks conducted by Russia, by any other country. We try to learn what's happening, and we try to keep pace with the times.
Brendan Mulvaney, is that how the U.S. defense establishment sees these reforms, that China is catching up very quickly, learning from warfare, which of course China hasn't been part of, but obviously U.S. and others have? And is it worried?
So that is the main question that we're asking ourselves, that attracts the most interest both in the United States and in Western countries, is what exactly is the aim of this? Certainly, like you said, China is a great country. It's got a huge economy, and most of those things come with interests around the world, and you need a military, or at least a military presence, to be able to protect that. As he said, China hasn't fought a war in a long time. Hopefully, I think everyone hopes that China doesn't fight a war anytime in the near future. Absolutely. And they continue to learn from other people's experience. They're great students of history. They've analyzed U.S. campaigns and things like that. But certainly the United States is interested in kind of what is the overall objective and what are they going to do with this great new military.
Shinashu, it's worth putting this in historical perspective, isn't it? The PLA's 90 years old, but also we've been through a rejuvenation, if you like, in China. This seems to be part of it. And also, there is a legacy, isn't there, of a century of national humiliation when China was weaker and now it's stronger. That plays into the sort of psyche as well on this 90th anniversary.
Well, yes. If you listen to the speech given by Chinese President Xi Jinping, both at the Zhuzhou, the National Military Parade, and also the speech given at the Great Hall of the People, basically this is a big occasion to celebrate the achievement over the past 90 years of the Chinese military, from a peasant army to today's one of the most modern, most powerful military. So there's something to celebrate. And also, secondly, basically he speaks to the domestic audience. The military, the rule of the military is really to protect the national territory, national sovereignty. Remember, among the 5 members of the UN Security Council, China is the only country which hasn't yet to achieve the full national reunification, meaning the separation between the mainland and Taiwan. So there's a real mission for the military to perform. Obviously, in the future, hopefully, as the guest in Washington says, China will never fight a war. And hopefully, it will only play a deterring role to maintain peace and stability and also the interests of the country.
As well as deterrence, of course, there's international operations which the PLA are increasingly part of. Zhao Xiaozhou, let me ask you this. As China becomes more of a global power, will they have an impact on international operations like we've seen with the United Nations peacekeeping, which has really ramped up since its debut in the 1990s?
Oh, yes. Chinese government has repeated many times, and it is a responsible power, and it is going to be a responsible power. I think that the PLA will perform internationally in a responsible way. And as you mentioned, China has contributed much to UN peacekeeping in many missions in Africa, in the Middle East, and in other parts of the world. In fact, back in 15 years ago, I was a military observer in the United Nations, UN peacekeeping, UN military observer in Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo. And I think there are more and more peacekeepers go abroad to other countries for peace. And also, I think China is going to play increasingly more important role in international security and in regional security. I think it is a force of peace and a force of security. I think with China's rise, it will play more increasingly more role in the world, in counter-piracy, in UN peacekeeping, in HADR, and in a lot of things. It tries to provide common security goods to the international community.
Let me follow up with you then, Zhao Xiaozhou. Obviously, that's all good, but is there also the potential for the PLA to be drawn into a conflict? And how do you see the PLA and the PLAN avoiding, the Navy, avoiding that going forward as Chinese military power and outreach and range continues to grow?